Hi everybody, and welcome to Bulwar 2.0. The dwarves looked with confused bewilderment at Captain Dwarfsgreg Blackbeard as he screamed these words while entering the improvised camping tavern. Argrod 15 was not what it used to be. The only light was coming from torches and fluorescent mushrooms, and hostile growls from cave critters and monsters were an almost constant white noise in the background. As terrible the things in the shadows were, they didn't dare to come close to the dwarven camp. The darkness of the caves knew the dwarves, and the dwarves knew the darkness of the caves. An expeditionary force in the depth of the mountains is like a boat on the ocean. Proper forethought, preparation, and discipline is needed to traverse the tunnels, as well as round-the-clock watch. When the captain sleeps, the second-in-command stands watch, and the shield wall guards rotate the perimeter defenses accordingly. But there was a great change in the Dwarvar, and that came in the form of the new expedition system. Hooray! I was personally excited about the government changes brought by the vanilla patch 1.24. The new expedition system really meshes well with it. Caverns of interest have been replaced in a sense by the expedition target modifiers that can appear on any province in the Serpentspine, whether they are caves, roads, or holds. In order to use them, all that is required is for you to control a province with the modifier, station an army in the province, and click the decision to launch the expedition. It's a bit opaque, so it can be confusing at first, but you should have most of the information that you need in the amazing new UI. An expedition requires men and resources to be successful. I think you should always aim to send 10,000 men every time. Morale and organization expedition stats are affected by your nation's morale and discipline stats. Morale is lost gradually while the expedition is active and will result in a wipe when it reaches 0. Organization affects the success of surviving random encounters and thus will spare your morale, supplies, and manpower in the long run. Supplies are consumed gradually by your men and are sometimes used in random encounters. A fully supplied army is always important. Party loot share is also important. The more the share, the slower the morale will drop during encounters, thus preventing an early failure. While on expedition, the party will gather loot while they explore dungeon floors. This can all happen in the background. Occasionally, the party will encounter various dungeon challenges that will require your input and will have various effects on your party's resources. It's all a matter of balancing the loot costs of an expedition versus the loot rewards. Loot is split between money and monarch power points. If you gain more loot than you spend, then you end up with a net positive reward. But at the beginning, I can see it a matter of exchanging one type of loot for another. As an adventure company, you suffer from a fairly severe lack of funds, especially if you intend to restore and build up a hold, so spending mana points to outfit your expedition will result in a massive relative cash revenue at the end. Later in the game, spending money on supplying an expedition and increasing morale will result in an opposite effect, a massive gain of monarch power points at the end of an expedition. It's a brilliant system that keeps being relevant throughout the game, which is awesome. Adventurers and migratory bands are particularly interested in the expeditions, because if the nations control only one province, they will receive an additional reward: adventuring efficiency and ancient dwarven knowledge. The latter can be kept and used when developing a hold for extra development or converted instantly into government reform progress. In my opinion, government reform progress is priority number 1. Dwarven knowledge cannot be converted to reform progress later, so I would recommend choosing the progress every time. In the old system, there was no point to get any government reforms as an adventurer before reforming a hold nation. Now, every one of them will mitigate the 50-year administrative efficiency penalty after reformation. 5 reforms will mitigate this malus entirely. As the adventurer bands gather progress very slowly, most of it will come from these expeditions, so keep that in mind. You might also want to avoid long expeditions while migrating around due to the fact that migrating out of the province while exploring will essentially doom the party and yield no loot at all. The new reforms are awesome in themselves as well, so if you never played an adventurer company, there is no better time to do it. Some expeditions have the seemingly random chance to result in the discovery of one of the new 8 monuments hidden in the Serpentspine. These can be then explored further to unlock the higher tiers, and some of the rewards are very cool. This means that not all of them will be discovered in every playthrough, and it's just a matter of chance that you encounter them. But they are an additional late-game reward for spelunkers. Fun fact is that not only dwarves benefit from these, but any subterranean race, so as disgusting as it is, cave goblins can also benefit. As the cherry on top, the AI actually seems to use the system too, and they will uncover some of these hidden monuments in time as well. I will leave the link to the developer diary that explains these expeditions in the video description, but from an initial look, it seems like the difficult ones do require around 150 organization from the 200 maximum, with necessary morale varying with the length of the dungeon, though more than 20 morale seems a bit overkill. I would always send a full 10,000 troop party with 100% supplies, just in case. It's a good idea to also give some party share of at least minimum 100, unless it's a particularly easy and short expedition. You'd rather be safe than sorry, but try not to overspend unless you aim to upgrade some discovered monument. Captain Blackbeard gave up on the idea to scout the tunnels to the southeast. Gorburat was a volcanic dead end and his men were in need of some rest and relaxation. Therefore, the cartels started a slow march west, only stopping to scout for some more loot to be able to pay for the ride tickets on the Tunnels of Love in Ovdal-Lodhum. While camping at the gates of the Garnet Hold, the captain sent his men on hold leave, but also sent a band to scout out the place. The spies came back with reports that the Garnet Grandmasters were holding a gem of the ancient crown of all dwarves. Dwosgreg Blackbeard rolled the dice, and greed before need prevailed. The cartel stormed the gates, ravaged the hold, and took the sapphire gem from the council chambers. A new Grandmaster was installed, and the Garnet dwarves would henceforth work as a vassal of the cartel. They would be left to rebuild the ravaged hold while the cartel moved on further west. Spelunking and exploration continued. On their adventures, the Blackbeard cartel encountered a band of organized goblins. The Thieving Arrow clan was mercilessly dismantled and the goblins were used as combat practice for the shield wall guards. Ultimately, the warband was purged and the adventurers pushed on west towards the hold of Arg Urdstun. After passing the whistling empty halls of Verkalskomdir, the band turned north at Argrod Junction 4 and passed through the old diamond quarry. At the lesser mines, they discovered the gruesome reality. The remnant at Arg Urdstun was no more, crushed and dismantled by the masked butcher orc clan. The captain ordered the attack, and revenge was swift. The orcs were slaughtered in turn and purged from the diamond halls. Tragically, there was no time to stay and rebuild. The choice was to either go further west towards Orlg Helovar or south towards Shazstundihr. The dice were cast again. The order was given and the cartel continued the slow march south towards the white marble gates of Bulwar. Once the southern hold was reached, the captain was expecting to meet some sort of thriving Bahari community to trade the gathered loot with, but was shocked to discover a land ruled by goblins in their traditional messy fashion. The marble halls were too vast to be fully dismantled, but the Marblehead clan desecrated the lands to the south with materials stolen from this ancient hold, and there was to be no negotiating with them. They were swiftly invaded, crushed, and Captain Blackbeard installed a vassal human state, Bahar Khand, to take care of the restructuring of the goblin lands in the cartel's name. In 1495, Captain Dwosgreg died and Captain Adar Breakbeard took charge of the company. After the Bahari adventure was concluded, he sent envoys back to Ovdal-Lodhum to give them the tragic news and check if they were in need of resources or emotional support. What was learned was that a new adventurer by the name of Began Stormhammer was making a name for himself in the Serpent's Reach. Insulting letters were exchanged between the two adventuring companies, and the two captains became instant rivals. Stormhammer flags were reported on the gates of Verkalskomdir, and Began's expedition was threatening to cut off the trading routes between the Blackbeard cartel and Ovdal-Lodhum. Colonization efforts were accelerated to meet this threat head-on, both down the Argrod and towards Arg Urdstun. The Diamond Hold was far from its past greatness, but the newly installed Serpent's Bloom fields would fuel the cartel's armies with food for the adventures to come. the diamond-crowned gem, thought to be lost forever, was miraculously discovered by an adventuring party during an expedition in the King's Border Cave, a shining day in the tunnels of the Dwarvar. Not wasting any time, the now neighboring Began's expedition took the flint dwarf mantle of Shazstundihr, now commanded by a crowned king. The Blackbeard clockwork bows deftly outmaneuvered their flint counterparts, and the long siege of Shazstundihr hold began. King Brock Ogreslayer was a terrible military leader, and his choices resulted in many of his men perishing while trying to reach the Garnet Hold to their east and leaving their capital exposed. Needless to say, he was ultimately defeated, and the Blackbeard cartel reinstalled a new Flint King vassal, securing the entirety of the central Serpent's Reach. Where Captain Dwosgreg was an excellent military organizer, Captain Adar's strengths were more diplomatic in nature. Expansion and conquest is expensive, and the adventuring company found itself in a difficult position. In the east, the two vassal kings created an alliance that threatened to end their service to the cartel. In the west, dwarven colonists had the strangest of encounters in the tunnels. Humans from Dostanor were mapping the caves and settled the glass hold of Orlg Helovar. The Corvurians were not hostile, but were strangely unfazed by the lack of sunlight, as other normal humans would be. The miners and workers were strangely silent and avoided eye contact with anyone. But the quartermasters and expedition leaders were always eager to share a pint and adventuring stories with the dwarves. Outside the White Gates, Bulwar was contested by the successor elven states, with the humans of Dartaxagerdim distracting the Birzartanshesi. Both a potential threat for the dwarves, but their interlocked conflicts kept them busy. To the east, though, the Mountain Hugger clan was a real threat. They have conquered all of eastern Bahar and were amassing an army on the border with the province of Vernat. A preemptive war was exactly what was needed at this point to distract the rebellious vassals. As the Goblin tide was pushed back, the copper hold of the Bahari coast was liberated, together with the rest of the coast up to the port city of Reuel. Of Daltungr, an ambitious project ruined by goblins, was now free again to light up its forges and lumber mills. Following their defeat, the Mountain Hugger clan was beset by invasions both by land and by sea from Ebortil and from Corvuria. They were swiftly removed from the map and from history altogether. In 1565, running out of monstrous threats, and after achieving the 5th Adventurer Reform, the Blackbeard cartel decided to elevate its position on the world stage and declare the reformation of the Hold of Shazstundihr, and thus the Marble Hold was reborn. If marble would be a liquid, then the Serpentspine would be flooded by it. When the cartel would first set foot into the White City, their breath was taken away. There was splendor even in the ruins. Awe turned to sorrow, then to rage. This rage was cast upon the goblins of Bahar, but it would eventually subside, and the story of Shazstundihr would unfold a new chapter, a new slate, a new beginning. The White Hold sat at the southern heights of the Serpent's Reach, having served as a point of entrance to Bulwar until its fall. This would be a guiding light for the dwarves as they would begin trading with the south. It was apparent that in order to expand and develop, the current methods of government would not suffice. The marble scholars gathered to discuss ideas on how to form a society that would allow talent to surface, while meeting the administrative needs of a hold that stands with one foot in the mountain and one on the sun-baked highlands of Bulwar. The scholars recovered as many ancient records as they could find, with most of them destroyed, and suggested the institution of a Republican Council, an institution that would allow only the most skilled citizens within the Hold's domain to participate within it, where they would advise the monarch in all things that fell under their field of expertise. With overwhelming support from government officials, the White Stone Council was installed. The government would disallow the purging of elves, humans and harpies, and would grant a massive construction cost reduction, lowered national unrest, as well as cheaper development costs. Breathing fresh air was nice at times, but the need to reconnect to the glass works of Orlg Helovar was becoming urgent. The squatting Corvurians had to be removed. Besides, they were being quite creepy and would often startle the dwarven laborers with their bizarre habits. A letter was sent to their rival, the Marquise Sophie Sil Aranen, and with Aranens distracting their western flank, Corvuria was attacked and made to relinquish their holdings within the Serpentspine together with the fort of South Tower. Oordia was released as a vassal to take care of the northern Bahari flank, and the Corvurians were slowly converted to the dwarven ancestor worship religion. There was to be no expulsion, but the dwarves had to be slowly moved into the glass hold for proper administration and maintenance. I think it's a good time to take a short look at the marble hold ideas before we move on. Their traditions grant a small -1 national unrest and a +1 diplomatic reputation set of bonuses. Not great, not terrible. Their first idea is one of the more important ones in my book. Master builders and sculptors grants -20% construction cost, which is quite big and adds up with other bonuses. The second idea, the Marble Gate, grants 20% fort defense, which is always good when playing a dwarf. Third idea, South Serpent Reach Cultural Crucible, is a strange one in the larger mechanical context, but makes sense from a narrative point of view. 20% religious unity and +1 maximum promoted cultures is fine, but religious unity is essentially negated by the massive tolerance of heathens gained later through missions, and promoting cultures is now twice as expensive for dwarves since the new patch, making it a bit unattractive. Mausoleum of Argor Whitebeard grants +1 yearly prestige. 100-point contracts is another good economy boost with a delicious 15% trade efficiency. The Whitestone Council grants legitimacy or a lowered re-election cost depending on the type of government, which is marginally useful for the Whitestone Council Republic. They also receive a small combat bonus in the form of 5% shock and fire damage mitigation. Their ambition is a serious 20% development cost reduction, which is mouth-watering for dwarves. Overall, the 20% construction cost and the 20% development cost reduction bonuses make up the meat of the idea set and more than compensate for the mediocrity of the other ideas. Construction cost is really the staple of this nation. Coming back to our story, the vassal dwarven kingdoms were slowly annexed so that their lands could be better administrated from the capital. Corvuria was attacked a second time as soon as the truce ran out, and the entirety of Oordia was taken away from them, with the main prize being the ancient tower of Bal Ourd. From that point on, no Canorian with malicious intent would ever set foot in Bahar again, yet traders, thinkers and artisans would always be welcome. Reuel Sport was developed to become magnificently beautiful, and an academy was built to invite the best minds from the shores of the Divenhall Sea. This would be a pattern that the Bulwari would enjoy. The more the marble dwarves would expand, the more of their marble marvels would spread across the land, the more opportunities there was for major cities in Bulwar to add such a permanent bonus to them. It would always be a choice of 3 local or global bonuses, so the dwarven grand mayors could pick and choose the developments they would prefer for each one. Reuel was the first of many. The Horde curse loomed over the Marble Kingdom due to the explosive growth of its building infrastructure and wealth. With so many distractions in Bahar, in the eastern reach of the Serpent's Reach, the Black Orcs of the Wretched Skull Clan have snuck and infested Gorburad. Even if the administration was battling the Horde curse, the Orcish menace had to be removed. Beasts without allies, cornered with their backs to the volcano, Wretched Skull was removed and the molten calderas were used to purify the tunnels of the monstrous infestation. With the entirety of the Serpentspine secured, the next step was to wrest control of the Bahar range from the Canorians. The Corvurians were again a target. New Corveld was a potential great city of the future. Also, the pirate province of Nathaler was diplomatically vassalized, so that their disruption of the dwarven Divenhall would stop. Next on the chopping block was Ebortil. They owned lands that needed to be liberated on the western tip of Bahar. The Grand Mayor gave some false promises to Busilar, and the reclamation war began. Ovdal Tungur produced many seaworthy boats, but they needed some expert maneuvering. They would stand no chance against the Ebortili fleet alone. With the aid of the pirates of Nathaler and the majestic Busilari navy, the island of Tef was invaded and Shazstundihr gathered enough leverage to grab and unite the entirety of Bahar under the marble banner. Back in Bulwar, the port city of Akatbar was developed. Local humans and sun elves were now officially part of the marble project. The now president, Adar Breakbeard himself, declared Akatbar the capital of all sun elves. The human population in the city received the announcement with great confusion. All the Sun Elves were living somewhere else, but whatever. As long as they don't bother anybody and grant their taxation, trade and production bonuses in peace, nobody really cares. The gnomes of Kannor sailed in and were allowed to open a local Gomo branch, further incentivizing the glass production in the port city. More renovations attracted the Dwarven Mason Guild, who opened up a branch of the MMC, enhancing production outputs locally and inspiring the global economy of the Republic. With the West secured forever, it was time to turn east. The Elven states have completely chopped up and divided the defiant human kingdom of Dartaxgerdim, and their intertwined alliances were a major roadblock. A gamble had to be made. The president saved the game and declared a blitz war against the Azka Evran theocracy. Their allies were dangerous. Sariand was huge, but embroiled in a war in Far Salahad. Elisna was a greater threat, but had to cross all of Bulwar. The gamble was to take the enemy capital before their mothballed fort could be reinforced with a real garrison, and then siege down the other forts in Kuzak and Akurmbag. Sieging these forts and enough of Azka Evran fast could lead to a fairly early victory before the Elven troops could reach the front. After many plates of cheese and some time distortions later, the deed was successfully accomplished. The Dwarven scattergunners were brave but stood little chance on the field against the highly disciplined Elven legions. Eventually, the Dwarven efforts were enough to conquer 3 provinces required for missions. Irliam and Kumarkand were instrumental in delaying the Elven armies. Initially wooed with marble, both nations became loyal friends. No matter how many times their lands were gifted away to appease enemies in wars and remove them from conflicts. Eventually they became so crippled that they had to agree to pledge allegiance to the President of the Marble Republic and therefore become his vassals. Chiseling away at marble was so much easier than chiseling at the Elven states in Bulwar. The President did not do it because it was easy, but because it was right. With Siranvar at Shazstundir's side, Azka Evran had to be removed as a political entity, toxic and destructive to the region as it was. Birzartanshes was punished next, and the city of Birzartanbar, after being devastated by conquest, was again propped up with marble columns, never to fall again to hatred and destruction. The dwarves built a wonderful palace that would inspire its populace to give up on old grudges and align with enthusiasm to the Marble Republic's projects. Expansion into the sun-kissed plains of the Suran and the countless encounters with the different human and elven armies gave one man an idea. The chief of staff of the Marble Dwarfs, General Simbur, issued a public letter to anyone who had ears to listen. The Whitestone Council took special note of it. It read something like this: Pointless fighting has dotted the history of Bulwar for centuries now. Jaher's landing on the continent changed the dynamic of the people forever. Now, people fight over the beliefs of superiority, inequality, all pushed forwards due to religion at the forefront. The sun cults, practically at each other's throats, fight to prove who is right in the name of their god, who even they make conflict over his name. It's nothing more than a foolish bout. People are free to have discourses and debates and discuss the nature of their gods. But the violence perpetrated here is something our ancestors have never seen, from Kannor and back into the Serpent's Reach. What is the need to fight here? Why can't we just agree to disagree? The people leading these kingdoms sure seem to love to preach the beliefs of elven superiority and having the blessing of Surael. Maybe it's time for a change of pace. A new era where the sun cults could at the very least attempt to live in peace. I hope you will all help me on this journey. Signed, General Simbur. And with these words, an age of no religious proselytizing and an age of permanent +3 tolerance of heathens has begun. North of Birzartanbar, in Akal Uak, a great cathedral of tolerance was built from dwarven marble. This cathedral would bless the Republic with even more tolerance of heathens. Alas, Simbur's dream could not be achieved peacefully, but it was a promising start. Bulwar was slowly heading towards peace, whether it would like it or not. In 1619, dwarven adventurers landed upon a marvelous discovery while prospecting some tunnels near Nez-Argrod Junction 1. They have discovered the gates that led to the mythical forge of Grumhardhum. Tons of supplies were gathered for further expeditions, and slowly but surely adventurers cleared one level after the other. They fought oozes, beasts, they solved a color riddle, busted an underground dam, and dismantled the dungeon's defenses one by one, inching closer to the furnace gate with every expedition. The final level revealed a massive, enraged fire elemental. With magic and cunning, the adventurers succeeded in containing the elemental in a rune-locked cage, and with its power, they reignited the Grumhardum. This allowed for producing tools and weapons of a quality never seen in millennia, which resulted in a massive local production bonus, army discounts, and a permanent 50% discount on digging through layers for future capital deepening projects. In Bulwar, a grand building spree commenced, incentivizing the architects to build cheaper and faster without sacrificing quality. Slowly and surely, the insidious Harpies, the isolated Gelkali, and the remaining successor states were pushed back more and more by the dwarven armies. The Harpies were made to see reason and settle down. Their unique vertical style of living proved to be a challenge for the dwarven architects, but in the end a magnificent platform was built as a dedicated hunting field. It was used for sport and allowed the surrounding people to be free of the Harpy nuisance and join the fight for freedom. The hardy Gelkali humans' skill at mining would sometimes even rival the dwarven one, and given the choice, they decided to bolster the production of the mines in the Serpentspine with their labor and innovative techniques. Gelkali miners would be employed throughout the Serpent's Reach. Near Varamhar, a grand academy was built, where the sharpest magical minds would study and debate, making the mage estate more loyal, while also encouraging safe and healthy technological advances. Their ultimate achievement was uniting flesh with machine and creating an impregnable army of living marble golems, fueled by the souls of brave volunteers. Though small, the Shazstundihr company was a fierce battle force on the field, tasked with the defense of the territories within the mountain. The Bulwar canals, grand as they were further enhanced by dwarven architects, and their learnings boosted productivity in the entire republic. Finally, Brasan, the rich, important port that hugged the Surand estuary, could be free to name itself the fleet maker of Shazstundihr. Human sailors from all across the Republic would gather here and board trading boats and warships to traverse the Divenhall to Anbennar coast and back. The unfortunate consequences of neighboring Orcish clans in the mountains did bring Shazstundihr in yet another conflict in the Serpentspine. This conflict also involved Segdir. The scouts were impressed to hear rumors that the Seg band were keeping the Citrin gem of the Dwarf Kron, so the opportunity was taken to raid the gate to Salahad and obtain the third gem. In 1650, most of Bulwar joined the Republic, and monumental marble edifices could be seen from West End to the Salahad Gate. The grandest of them all were the new marble gates that were built in the capital. These ones were rebuilt not for defense, but for joy. The inside of the gates was engraved with stories of genies, god kings, the rising of the sun cult, the establishment of the Bulwari Accord, the Akalshesi Renaissance, the landing of Jaher, and then the refounding of Shazstundihr. A historical gift to Bulwar, and the result of a nation building that included anyone who would be sane enough to participate. The past was to be remembered and understood, and a prosperous future was to be embraced, with its gates perpetually open. The new marble gates inspired the populace with a massive -3 national unrest, 15% stability cost, and a -0.1 monthly autonomy change bonuses. The White Stone Council also had a minor reformation. The new form of government, the Almvüchte Republic, was to be the incarnation of justice and equality for men, dwarves, elves, and harpies alike. The unrest mitigation was replaced by an aggressive expansion mitigation bonus, which allowed the Republic to focus on external matters and potential threats. Simbur's plan turned out to work after all. Peace, equality, and discourse prevailed. Alas, Simbur himself has long passed away, but not before issuing a final letter to the former president, Adar. The letter was lost and later found by his family in their residence in Akatbar. It read something like this: "To a dear friend, I don't think that I have to be so formal with you. When we first met, you were simply a noble, but as we talked, I realized our ideologies and ideas will prove to be all too alike. You are an idealist, and that is worth well enough praise on its own. It wasn't just that thought. Thanks to you, we managed to save tens of thousands of people from oppression and gave them a chance at a free life. While I spent my younger days slaughtering hordes of goblins and orcs, I came to learn as I grew ever older that even they are worthy of respect and honor in their own right. Each of these beings had to complete a course of trial and tribulation and eventually succeeded in their own ways, even if we don't have the best of relations. By destroying the Sudes, who called themselves the rightful owners of Bulwar, we managed to clear out an illness that had been plaguing the region for so long: oppression through hierarchy. From my bed, I can now see the harpies flying above the clouds, dwarves building hundreds of towers, and elves serving alongside humans to protect the city of Akatbar. As I lay in my bed, tired and needing assistance to get around anywhere, I thank you for helping me give others long and fruitful lives just like mine. You are an inspiration to all, and I'm thankful to have served alongside you. As my final wish, I grant you my family title, of which you have done nothing but embody and become a true exemplar of. I hope our paths may cross once more in another life." The peaceful end of an old idealist who will be remembered forever. Godspeed, hero. With peace in their time, nothing would stop rebuilding, not even the violent outbreak of a deadly plague. The serpent's rot ravaged the mountain, but the people of Bulwar contributed all they could to the efforts to discover the source of the disease and a potential cure. After the cure was devised, it was spread through the intricate ventilation system to cure all the people affected by it, dubbing Shazstundihr as the cure bringers. All was left now was to use the newfound powers granted by the completion of Simbur's plan to find the rest of the pieces of the Dwarf Crown and unite the mountain. Scouts and spies were sent far and wide to divine the location of the missing crown pieces. Reports came back with a lot of information. The ruby gem and the empty crown were in the possession of the dwarven scholars of Durvajatun. The agate gem was in the possession of the Eskani Counts League. The jade gem was owned by the Jade March, a slave state of the terribly massive Command. The final gem, amethyst, was lost and rumored to be somewhere in the Serpentspine. If logic was to be stressed, it should have been somewhere close to Hul az Krakazol, the amethyst hold. Unfortunately, that was also in the hands of the Jade March. The command had to be faced head-on and not only once. With reduced aggressive expansion and slightly reduced coring costs, carried by armies fueled by the enthusiasm of democracy and with fervent dwarven nationalism, Shazstundihr expanded into the north and east. Yet in the west, there was one more loose end. The legacy of marble was to be made legendary, and exports would need to begin towards Kannur. 3 potential trading partners were initially identified: Vern, Seinathil, and Silverforge. Delegations of diplomats were sent to the 3 courts and amicable relations were nourished. The trade in Bahar was contested by the stone lions of Busilar, and more trade power was required to be able to traverse the Divan Hall unopposed. A rare trade conflict had to be declared, and with the aid of Siranvar and Vern, the Busilari trade was cornered and the export of marble could begin. The mission initiated a recurring event, The Divan Hall would see marble every year, and every year a great festival would be arranged in Brasan, where rich merchants and nobles from Kannor would gather to feast and trade. One large slab would be reserved as a gift of sorts. Prestigious families would compete for the honor of buying it every year. The marble president would choose a winner. Choosing a winning faction would yield a large chunk of money and a temporary buff that would last until the next event. This would usually go to the magisters for a 5% mana cost discount, but during difficult wars, the Silhaven family would receive it for a discipline boost. This event can be a bit annoying at times, but it is an unlimited supply of cash and an almost permanent 5% mana discount that is nothing to sneeze at. With buildings being so cheap, money is almost never an issue for Shazstundihr, and spending it on useful things becomes a real challenge. Nevertheless, the marble-clad armies encountered tough resistance in the Serpentspine. Hammerholm was released in Escan and was given Castonath. They would guard Escan and the north in later conflicts. Every other hold was slowly annexed and the 3 missing pieces were recovered. The command's power seemed to be uncontainable, but the marble warriors waited for the chance to strike. The chance first came while the command was tied up in a conflict with the United Lake Federation. The Federation would stand no chance against the hobgoblins, but the massive amount of fortified lands would keep them busy for years. Shazstundihr also allied their former partner Yanshen. Yanshen refused the command's defensive call, being exhausted by their common incursion in the Forbidden Plains. With great haste, many forts in Arahen were sieged down and the Jade Gem was secured. Only one remained, Amethyst. This required a second war against them. This time they were alone and had to face the Marble Republic on the western flank, Yanshen on the eastern one, and the Bomdan united under the banner of Baihon Shin to the south. The hobgoblins fought bravely, but could not prevail against such an overwhelming force. They were thus made to give up half the lands of their Jade March, and the search for the final gem began earnestly. Restoring Hula's Krakazol hold and expelling the goblins from it did not yield the gem, but a few caves nearby had still not been fully explored. An expedition was sent in the Tree of Stone to search for the gems, without great hope for success. Fortune did smile upon the adventurers, and eventually the final piece of the crown was found, and they were all mounted upon the Dwarf Kron. The crown was reforged! Hooray! And what a joy it was! And so ends the story of the Marble Dwarfs. I had a different thing in mind for the new update, but I had to play one of the new dwarfs first. So many cool new things. I didn't even talk about the other underground monuments I have found while conquering nations in the mountain. I decided on Shazstundihr because it looked the most mellow of the new options, the tallest of the dwarfs. Even if their theoretical focus is building, they are forced to do a lot of conquest in Bulwar, which is not that bad. It gives you something to do, but it does distract from the mountain itself. The fact that liberating cities and rebuilding them from marble gives a choice of permanent province upgrades makes it very compelling. I wanted to get to the next target just to see what other options do I get. At the start, shortly upon formation, Shazstundihr can stack a large number of similar construction cost modifiers. So you get 20% from its first national idea, 10% from the ancestor worship blessing, 10 to 30% from the 8 construction spell, let's say 20% to be realistic, 20% from the unique government, 10% from an early mission, 10% from economic ideas, 10% from legacy of adventures, and 5% from renaissance. This is already 105% construction cost reduction, which is capped at 90% in reality. This is further boosted by expanding infrastructure in holds, which you should do as much as possible, even if you lose some of the other bonuses for whatever reason. Building manufactories for 50 ducats everywhere you can never felt better. So if you want to choose a dwarven nation to play as, and your aim is to build everything everywhere all the time, this is it. You can even build non-economy buildings during the Horde curse. Nothing matters, they are basically free. and this includes hold digging projects. Their final missions do give you the tools to focus on conquering more wherever you want, and even if they are not a fundamental change to the gameplay, they are welcome. I used them with great success while hunting for the missing dwarven gems. The aggressive expansion mitigation did prevent some potential coalitions from happening, and that was all that I really needed. Finding each gem will grant a permanent small boost. Finding all of the Dragon Balls will allow you to reforge them into the crown. This coalesces all of the individual bonuses into one and doubles each of them. In addition, the holder of the crown can form Owl Dwarov, if they have the Dwarven administration, of course. Owl Dwarov is sadly not finished at the time of recording, so there is really nothing else as amazing to do after forming them. But once their missions will be complete, man, this will be a massively interesting campaign. The one exclamation point was that I lost access to my unique Shazstundihr mercenary company upon forming Owl Dwarov, which was not the end of the world, but a bit sad, because I grew a little bit attached to my little golem army. I'm very happy with the new Children of Ruin expansion, and I hope you are too. The new government system also moves things around in a very good way, but compared to the other exciting changes, it does take a back seat this time. The infrastructure expansion feature that was buffed in vanilla is also amazing for the dwarfs. You should be expanding infrastructure forever in all of the holds, and in the end game you should have all the government capacity you need. The 25% development cost reduction per expansion is amazingly good. Another old feature made new in the mod is that now states can be centralized to reduce absurd amounts of governing capacity, but the lack of reform progress makes this difficult for republics at least. Overall, good stuff. And before we depart, I would like of course to thank my patrons and YouTube members for their trust and ongoing support. So thank you Baconomics, thank you Loop4X, thank you Shredded Paper Plate, thank you Jacob Rubin, thank you Alex, thank you Thorsmain, thank you Darth Mozart, thank you Old Toby, thank you Casimir Overall, and thank you Michael VR. See you all in the next one.